Hi, boys and girls. Welcome back. We are going to do the read aloud for chapter 6 in The Wind in the Willows, and it's called Dulce Domum Part 1. Not long after their adventures in the wild wood, the rat and the mole found themselves plodding silently along a country lane. The rapid nightfall of mid-December had already descended upon them. The mole was thinking of supper as he followed obediently behind the rat, leaving the guidance in the darkness entirely to him. As for the rat, he was walking a little way ahead, as was his habit. He walked steadily with his shoulders humped, his eyes fixed on the straight gray road in front of him. This is why he did not notice poor Mole when suddenly something soft and subtle, carried gently upon the cool night air, caused Mole to stop dead in his tracks. It was one of these mysterious sensory moments that suddenly reached Mole in the darkness. It made him tingle through and through with its familiar appeal, even though he could not clearly remember what it was. What do you think a sensory moment is? As you heard earlier, you use your senses to perceive things, to take things in. Mole is using his senses in this moment to perceive something in the darkness. Having stopped suddenly in the pitch black of the night, his nose searched hither and thither in an effort to recapture the vague scent that had so strongly moved him. A moment, and he had caught it again, and with it this time came recollection in fullest flood. Home! The essence of which had wafted through the air. Why, it must be quite close by him at that moment, his old home. The one he had forsaken and never sought again, that day when he first found the river. And now it was sending out its scouts and its messengers to capture him and bring him in. The phrase, its scouts and its messengers, is the author's way of saying that the scent of Mole's home is acting like scouts looking for Mole and like messengers bringing him a message, "Come home!" Since his escape on that bright morning, Mole had hardly given it a thought, so absorbed was he in his new life with all its pleasures, surprises, and captivating experiences. Now, with a rush of old memories, how clearly it stood up before him in the darkness. Shabby indeed, and small and poorly furnished, and yet it was his. It was the home he had made for himself, the home he had been so happy to get back to after his day's work. And the home had been happy with him too, evidently, and was missing him and wanted him back. The call was clear, the summons was plain. He must obey it instantly and go. "Ratty!" he called, full of joyful excitement. "Hold on! Come back!" "Oh, come along, Mole, do," replied the rat cheerfully, still plodding along. "Please stop, Ratty," pleaded the poor mole in anguish of heart. "You don't understand. It's my home, my old home. I've just come across the smell of it, and it's close by. I must go to it. I must. Oh, come back, Ratty. Please, please come back." The rat was by this time very far ahead, too far to hear clearly what the mole was calling. He was also too far away to catch the sharp note of painful appeal in his voice, and he was much taken up with the weather, for he too could smell something suspiciously like approaching snow. "Mole, we mustn't stop now, really," he called back. We'll come for it tomorrow, whatever it is you've found. But I daren't stop now. It's late, and the snow's coming on again, and I'm not sure of the way. So come on quick, there's a good fellow." And the rat pressed forward on his way without waiting for an answer. Poor Mole stood alone in the road, his heart torn asunder and a big sob gathering somewhere low down inside him. But even under such a test as this, his loyalty to his friend stood firm. Never for a moment did Mole dream of abandoning Rat. Meanwhile, the wafts from his old home pleaded and whispered to him. He dared not tarry longer within their magic circle. With a wrench that tore his very heartstrings, he set his face down the road and followed submissively in the track of the rat, while faint little smells reproached him for his new friendship and his forgetfulness. With an effort, he caught up to the unsuspecting rat, who began chattering cheerfully about what they would do when they got back. In the midst of his descriptive fervor, the rat failed to notice his companion's silence and despair. At last, however, when they had gone some considerable way further, he stopped and said kindly, "Look here, Mole, old chap, you seem dead tired. No talk left in you, and your feet dragging like lead. We'll sit down for a minute and rest. The snow has held off so far, and the best part of our journey is over." The mole rested forlornly on a tree stump and tried to control himself, for he felt it surely coming. The sob he had fought with so long refused to be beaten. Up and up it forced its way to the air, and then another, till poor Mole at last gave up the struggle and cried freely and helplessly. The rat, astonished and dismayed at the violence of Mole's grief, did not dare to speak for a while. At last he said, very quietly and sympathetically, "What is it, old fellow? Whatever can be the matter? Tell us your trouble, and let me see what I can do." Poor Mole found it difficult to get any words out between such heavy sobs. "I know it's a shabby, dingy little place," he sobbed forth at last brokenly. "Not like your cozy quarters, or Toad's beautiful hall, or Badger's great house. But it was my own little home, and I was fond of it, and I went away and forgot all about it. And then I smelt it suddenly on the road when I called, and you wouldn't listen, Rat, and everything came back to me with a rush, and I wanted it. Oh dear, and when you wouldn't turn back, Ratty, and I had to leave it, though I was smelling it all the time, I thought my heart would break. We might have just gone and had one look at it, Ratty, only one look. It was close by, but you wouldn't turn back, Ratty, you wouldn't turn back. Oh dear, oh dear." Recollection brought fresh waves of sorrow, and sobs again took full charge of him, preventing further speech. The rat stared straight in front of him, saying nothing, only patting Mole gently on the shoulder. After a time he muttered gloomily, "I see it all now. What a pig I have been! Just a pig, a plain pig!" He waited till Mole's sobs became gradually less stormy and more rhythmical. He waited till at last sniffs were frequent and sobs only intermittent. Then he rose from his seat, and remarking carelessly, "Well, now we'd really better be getting on, old chap," and with that Rat set off up the road they had just traveled upon. "Wherever are you going to, Ratty?" cried the tearful Mole, looking up in alarm. "We're going to find that home of yours, old fellow," replied the rat pleasantly. "So you had better come along, for it will take some finding, and we shall want your nose." Or, in other words, Rat needs Mole's strong sense of smell to find the quarters. "Oh, come back, Ratty, do!" cried the Mole, getting up and hurrying after him. "It's no good, I tell you. It's too late and too dark, and the place is too far off, and the snow's coming, and I never meant to let you know I was feeling that way about it. It was all an accident and a mistake. And think of the riverbank and your supper." "Hang riverbank and supper too," said the rat heartily. "I tell you, I'm going to find this place now if I stay out all night. So cheer up, old chap, and take my arm, and we'll very soon be back there again." Still snuffling, pleading, and reluctant, Mole suffered himself to be dragged back along the road by his companion. When at last it seemed to the rat that they must be nearing the part of the road where the Mole had been held up, he said, "Now, no more talking. Business. Use your nose and give your mind to it." They moved on in silence for some little way, when suddenly the rat was conscious, through his arm that was linked in Mole's, of a faint sort of electric thrill that was passing down that animal's body. Instantly he disengaged himself, fell back a pace, and waited. The signals were coming through. Mole stood a moment rigid, while his uplifted nose, quivering slightly, felt the air. What do you look like if you stand in a rigid way? Are you really stiff, or are you slumped over? Then a short, quick run forward, a fault, a check, a try back, and then a slow, steady, confident advance. The rat, much excited, kept close to his heels as the mole, with something of the air of a sleepwalker, crossed a dry ditch, scrambled through a hedge, and nosed his way over a field. Suddenly, without giving warning, Mole dived, but the rat was on the alert and promptly followed him down the tunnel to which his unerring nose had faithfully led him. Thanks for listening, boys and girls.